Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. Is it possible for an HOA to steal your property? They certainly tried with me. They sued me over my driveway, but their entire case was a lie. So I decided to play their game, and what I revealed at their next public meeting was a checkmate they never saw coming. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to get into a war with a homeowners association. Growing up, my parents always warned me about buying property in HOA communities, but I figured those horror stories were exaggerations. Turns out they weren't. My house sits on a corner lot in what used to be a quiet suburban neighborhood. When I bought the place about 8 years ago, there was no HOA. The subdivision had been built back in the early days before developers realized they could squeeze extra control and money out of homeowners by creating these little fiefdoms. Most of us liked it that way. We mowed our lawns, kept things neat, and minded our own business. Then the empty lot next to the main entrance got developed into a fancy clubhouse and community center. A group of newer residents, the kind who moved here from gated communities and couldn't function without rules governing every aspect of life, pushed hard to form an HOA. They promised it would be voluntary and that existing homeowners wouldn't be forced to join. That lasted about 6 months. Once they had enough members, they started pressuring the rest of us. They sent letters claiming that homes outside the HOA were bringing down property values. They organized petition drives. They even tried to get the county to force membership through some zoning technicality that went nowhere. Most of my neighbors caved eventually, tired of the harassment. I held out, along with a handful of others on my street. My corner lot became a particular obsession for them. See, my property is positioned at one of the main intersections in the neighborhood. My driveway is long and runs parallel to the side street for about 40 feet before curving toward my house. It's paved, well-maintained, and honestly one of the nicest driveways in the area. I'd had it completely redone a few years back with proper drainage and everything. The HOA board hated that they couldn't control what I did with my property. They'd send their landscape inspector to photograph my yard if my grass was half an inch too long by their standards. They'd complain to the county about my boat being visible from the street, even though it was parked legally on my own property. Every petty thing they could think of, they tried. But the driveway became their white whale. It started when they decided to implement new parking rules for the neighborhood. Street parking was now prohibited except for guests, and even then only for a limited time. They wanted everyone to park in their garages or driveways. Fine by me since I already did that. But then they started talking about how they needed to optimize traffic flow through the neighborhood. One of the board members, who lived 3 houses down from me, started complaining at meetings that my driveway created a safety hazard because people turning onto the side street might confuse it for a road. This was absurd. My driveway had a clear curb cut, was obviously residential, and had been there for decades without incident. But facts didn't matter to these people. The harassment ramped up over the following year. I'd find notices stuck to my door claiming I was in violation of rules I'd never agreed to follow. They tried to fine me multiple times, which I ignored since I wasn't a member. They sent certified letters threatening legal action. My wife was getting stressed about it, and I was getting angry. Then came the community meeting that changed everything. I didn't usually attend these things since I wasn't a member, but my wife convinced me we should go to this one. The agenda mentioned something about addressing non-compliant properties, and we figured we should know what they were planning. The meeting was held at their clubhouse on an evening in late fall. About 30 people showed up, mostly board members and their supporters. The president, a guy who'd retired early from some corporate job and now spent his time micromanaging the neighborhood, ran through the usual business. Then he got to the item about non-compliant properties. He pulled up a slideshow on the projector. The first image was an aerial view of my house and property. As you can see, this property presents several issues for our community. The owner has repeatedly refused to join the HOA despite numerous invitations. More problematically, this driveway here creates confusion and safety concerns. I raised my hand. That's my house. What safety concerns are you talking about? He gave me this condescending smile. We've had reports of people attempting to turn down your driveway thinking it's a through street. It's a hazard. Who reported this? I've lived there 8 years and never seen anyone do that. He ignored my question and clicked to the next slide. It showed a crude drawing of my property with the driveway marked in red. We've consulted with our attorney, and there's a provision in the county code that allows for the seizure of improperly configured residential driveways that pose a public safety risk. My wife grabbed my arm. I could feel my face getting hot. You're saying you want to seize my driveway? We're saying the HOA has a responsibility to ensure community safety. If you won't voluntarily modify your driveway to meet our specifications, we'll have to pursue other options. I'm not in your HOA. You have no authority over my property. The county code supersedes individual ownership in cases of public safety. Our attorney assures us we have a strong case. The smugness in his voice made me want to throw something. Instead, I stood up. You're threatening to take my property based on made-up safety concerns? The concerns are very real. We have a petition signed by 43 residents expressing worry about that driveway. 43 people you probably harassed into signing. He straightened his papers. Sir, if you're going to be disruptive, I'll have to ask you to leave. Don't worry, I'm going, but you should know I'm not letting you touch my property. We'll see about that, he said as I walked out, my wife hurrying behind me. In the parking lot, she looked shaken. Can they really do that? Can they take our driveway? I have no idea, but we're going to find out. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney. I explained the situation, and he was skeptical that the HOA had any legal grounds to seize my driveway. He advised me to request documentation of their legal basis and to absolutely not sign anything they sent me. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. It was full of legal language, but basically claimed that my driveway violated county setback requirements and created a public hazard. They demanded I either modify it to their specifications, which included shortening it by 20 feet and adding barriers, or they would seek a court order to have it seized by the county and modified at my expense. My attorney reviewed it and laughed. This is garbage. They're citing code sections that don't apply to residential properties. The setback claim is especially ridiculous since your driveway was built before current codes even existed. So what do? Ignore it for now. If they actually file suit, we'll destroy them in court, but I doubt they will. This reads like an intimidation tactic. He was half right. They did file suit about 6 weeks later. I got served with papers claiming the HOA was seeking an injunction to force modification of my driveway due to safety violations and code non-compliance. My attorney filed a response that basically said they were full of it and had no standing. He also filed a counterclaim for harassment. The case got assigned a hearing date about 4 months out. Those 4 months dragged by slowly. Meanwhile, the HOA ramped up their campaign. They started parking official-looking vehicles near my house to monitor the supposed safety issues. They encouraged members to document any instance of someone even slowing down near my driveway. They sent letters to all the neighbors warning them about the hazardous condition at my address. I was furious but tried to stay calm. My attorney kept telling me we had a solid case and to let it play out, but the stress was getting to both of us. My wife started having trouble sleeping. I was snapping at people at work. The whole thing was consuming our lives. Then I got an idea. If they wanted to claim my driveway violated setback requirements and county codes, maybe I should get the county involved. Not to side with them, but to actually survey the property and document exactly where all the boundaries were and whether any violations existed. I called the county planning department and requested a full property survey. The clerk I spoke with seemed confused about why I needed one, so I explained the situation. She put me on hold for a few minutes, then came back and said they could send someone out the following week. She mentioned there'd be a fee of around $300, which seemed like a bargain if it settled this mess. The surveyor who showed up was a middle-aged guy with a weathered face and the no-nonsense attitude of someone who'd been doing this work for decades. I explained what was happening with the HOA, and he just shook his head. HOAs, always causing problems. Let's see what we've got here. He spent about 3 hours taking measurements, checking property pins, consulting old records on his tablet, and walking the perimeter of my lot. I followed him around nervously, wondering what he'd find. Finally, he came up to my front porch where I was waiting. Well, your driveway is perfectly legal. Setbacks are all good. It was built before the current codes, so it's protected under existing use. No violations that I can see. I felt relief wash over me. So the HOA is wrong? About your driveway being illegal? Completely, but I did find something interesting. What's that? He pulled out a plot map on his tablet and zoomed in. See this line here? That's your actual property boundary along the side street. And see where it extends to? I looked but couldn't make sense of the technical drawing. Not really. He pointed toward the street. Your property line extends about 8 feet past where you probably think it does. That decorative brick wall the HOA installed along the street, about 15 feet of it is actually on your property. I stared at him. You're sure? Positive. I've located the original iron property pins and everything lines up. When they put in that wall a few years back, they either didn't survey properly or they knew and didn't care. The wall he was talking about was one of the HOA's Pride and Joy projects. They'd spent a bunch of money installing these brick pillars with decorative iron sections between them along all the main streets in the neighborhood. It was supposed to give the community a unified upscale look. The section near my property had a big sign that said, Oakmont Heights Community with their logo. Can I get all this in writing? I'll have the full report to you in a few days, official county survey with all the documentation. When the report arrived, I took it straight to my attorney. He read through it and started grinning. This is perfect. They're suing you claiming your driveway violates property codes. Meanwhile, they've built a structure on your land without permission. What can we do with this? Oh, we can do a lot. First, we're going to amend our counterclaim to include their encroachment, but I think we should hold off on sending them anything just yet. Why? He leaned back in his chair. Because the HOA has their monthly board meeting coming up in about 2 weeks. These meetings are technically open to any resident, including non-members who want to observe. What if we let them have their meeting and spring this on them there? I liked the way he was thinking. You mean show up and hit them with the survey results in front of everyone? Exactly. Maximum impact. They've been making you look like the bad guy at their meetings. Time to return the favor. The next 2 weeks felt like forever. I kept checking the HOA website for the meeting agenda, and sure enough, there was an item listed as Update on Legal Action, Maple Street Property. They were planning to discuss their lawsuit against me. The night of the meeting, I showed up with my attorney and the county survey report in a folder. About 40 people were there, mostly board members and their supporters. A few neighbors I recognized gave me curious looks. The president went through the usual business approving minutes, discussing landscaping contracts and debating whether to repaint the clubhouse. Then he got to new items. As many of you know, we've filed legal action regarding the hazardous driveway situation on Maple Street. I'm pleased to report our attorney is confident we'll prevail and have the situation resolved within a few months. People nodded and murmured approval. Someone in the back asked if I'd agreed to modify the driveway yet. No, unfortunately the property owner continues to be obstinate, but the law is on our side. We have clear documentation that the driveway violates multiple code sections. I raised my hand. The president looked annoyed but acknowledged me. Yes? I just wanted to let the board know I had the county planning department conduct a full property survey last week. You could feel the energy in the room shift. The president's face went a bit pale. Several board members exchanged glances. That was unnecessary, he said, trying to maintain his composure. Our attorney already reviewed the property boundaries. Really? Because the county surveyor found some interesting things. I opened my folder and pulled out the survey report. According to the official county survey, my driveway is completely legal. 0 setback violations, 0 code violations. Everything's protected under existing use since it was built before your codes even existed. The president started to interrupt, but I kept going. But here's the really interesting part. The surveyor also found that about 15 feet of your decorative wall, the one with the big community sign on it, is actually built on my property. You put a structure on my land without permission. The room went dead silent. One of the other board members grabbed the president's arm and whispered something urgently. I could see people in the audience turning to each other with confused expressions. My attorney stood up. We have the official county survey here conducted by a licensed surveyor using the original iron property pins and county records. Your wall is encroaching on my client's property. So while you're suing him for imaginary violations, you're the ones actually violating property law. The president tried to maintain composure. This is highly irregular. You should have sent this through proper channels, not ambushed us at a meeting. Like you ambushed me at a meeting when you put my house on a slideshow and announced you were seizing my driveway? I replied. I figured turnabout was fair play. Several people in the audience started talking at once. Someone demanded to see the survey. Another person asked why they weren't told the HOA was spending money on a lawsuit. A woman in the front row wanted to know how much this was costing. The vice president was frantically typing on her phone, probably texting their attorney. The president tried to call for order, but people kept interrupting with questions. How much had been spent on legal fees? Why wasn't the property properly surveyed before filing suit? What would happen to the wall? Would the HOA be liable for damages? Had the board consulted the membership before authorizing this lawsuit? That last question seemed to hit a nerve. The president stammered something about having authority to handle legal matters, but people weren't buying it. A guy I recognized from 3 streets over stood up and said he'd never voted to authorize any lawsuit and demanded to know the total cost so far. The exact figures are confidential attorney-client matters, the president said. "The money comes from our dues," the guy shot back. "We have a right to know." After about 10 minutes of chaos, the president finally gave up. His face was red and he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "We're going to adjourn this meeting and reconvene once we've consulted with our attorney about these new developments." "Actually," my attorney said, "before you adjourn, I should inform the board that we'll be filing an amended counterclaim tomorrow regarding the encroachment. You might want to discuss that with your attorney as well, along with the harassment claims and the demand for recovery of my client's legal fees." The president slammed his papers down on the table. "This meeting is adjourned." He didn't even wait for a motion or a vote. He just walked out through the back door. The vice president sat there looking stunned, then finally called for a motion to adjourn, which someone made and someone else seconded. The meeting broke up with people clustered in small groups talking urgently. Several residents came up to me afterward. A couple apologized for believing the board's narrative about my property being a safety hazard. One woman said she'd voted against forming the HOA in the first place and wished more people had listened. Another guy asked if I had copies of the survey because he thought the HOA might have encroached on his property too. My attorney and I left feeling pretty good about how things had gone. The drive home, my wife asked how it went, and I told her the whole story. She actually laughed, which was the first time she'd seemed happy about any of this in months. Within a week, the HOA's attorney called mine requesting a meeting. We met at my attorney's office. The HOA president and 2 board members showed up along with their attorney. They all looked uncomfortable and tired. Their attorney opened with some nonsense about how there must be some misunderstanding about the property lines. My attorney cut him off and laid out the survey results in detail. The county had definitively established where my boundaries were, and their wall was absolutely on my property. "So, here's the situation," my attorney said. "You're suing my client, claiming his driveway violates codes and needs to be modified. Meanwhile, you've built a structure on his land without permission. You have 2 choices. Drop your lawsuit, remove your wall from his property, and pay a portion of his attorney fees as part of the settlement. Or we proceed with our amended countersuit, and you can explain to a judge why you think it's acceptable to encroach on someone's property, while simultaneously suing them for imaginary violations." The HOA president tried to argue. "That wall serves the entire community. It would be unreasonable to remove it over a technicality." My attorney smiled. Interesting choice of words. "You want to modify my client's driveway over what we've proven is a technicality, but your actual encroachment on his property should be overlooked? I don't think a judge is going to see it that way. The driveway is a safety issue." "No, it isn't. The county has confirmed it meets all requirements and is protected under existing use provisions. You made up the safety concerns. We have documentation of your harassment campaign. We have recordings from your meetings. You don't have a leg to stand on." They went back and forth for a while, but the HOA's position was obviously untenable. Their attorney kept trying to find some middle ground, but my attorney wasn't budging. Finally, they asked to caucus privately. We stepped out of the conference room and waited in the hallway for about 20 minutes. When we came back in, they had a proposal. They'd drop the lawsuit if I'd allow the wall to remain and waive any claims for damages. "Not happening," I said. "You've harassed me for years, tried to steal my property, stressed out my family, cost me thousands in legal fees, and wasted my time with a bogus lawsuit. The wall comes down." "Be reasonable," one of the board members said. "That wall cost over $30,000 to install. The entire community will suffer if it has to be removed. Should have thought of that before you started this fight. Should have surveyed the property before building on it. Should have definitely thought twice before suing me over a driveway that was perfectly legal." We went back and forth for another hour. My attorney kept reminding them that we could also pursue damages for the harassment campaign, the impact on my property value from their false claims, and potentially even pursue the individual board members personally for abuse of authority. That seemed to scare them. Eventually, they agreed to drop the lawsuit, pay a portion of my attorney fees, sign a document agreeing to stop all harassment, and acknowledge that my property was legally compliant, and remove the portion of the wall on my property within 90 days. In exchange, I agreed not to seek additional damages for the encroachment or the harassment campaign. My attorney wanted me to push for more, but I was tired. I just wanted this to be over. We signed the settlement agreement right there. The HOA board meeting where they announced the settlement to the membership was apparently brutal. I wasn't there, but my next-door neighbor who was a member attended and filled me in later. The board tried to spin it as a reasonable compromise, but people were furious when they found out about the lawsuit costs and the wall issue. Apparently, the board had never told the general membership they were suing me. They'd just authorized spending HOA funds on attorney fees without explaining what it was for. When people found out they'd spent close to $15,000 on a bogus lawsuit and now had to remove part of their decorative wall, there was an uproar. Several members demanded the board's resignation on the spot. Others wanted a full audit of HOA finances to see what else they'd been hiding. The president tried to maintain control, but people kept shouting questions at him. Someone made a motion for a vote of no confidence in the entire board. Another person demanded an emergency election. The vice president tried to calm things down by saying they'd acted in good faith based on their attorney's advice, but that just made people angrier. Why had they trusted an attorney without getting a survey first? Why hadn't they consulted the membership before filing suit? Why had they spent so much money fighting someone who wasn't even in the HOA? According to my neighbor, the president ended up storming out of that meeting too. Just got up and left while people were still yelling questions. The other board members sat there looking miserable until someone finally moved to adjourn. Within 2 months, the entire board had been replaced. The new president was a retired engineer who'd been vocally opposed to the lawsuit from the start. He reached out to me with an apology and asked if we could start fresh. I told him I appreciated the gesture but had no interest in joining the HOA. He said that was fine and that they'd be leaving me alone from now on. They removed the wall section from my property right on schedule. A crew showed up one morning with jackhammers and a small excavator. It took them most of the day to remove the brick pillars and iron sections. They filled in the holes and tried to restore the landscaping, though it still looked patchy. The gap in their decorative perimeter was obvious and bothered them way more than it bothered me. Some of the new board members suggested rebuilding it properly on the correct property line, but that would have meant either eating into the sidewalk or getting easements from multiple property owners. The cost estimate came back at over $40,000 because they'd need to relocate utilities. Last I heard, they just left it as is. The best part came about 3 months after the settlement. The HOA had to levy a special assessment on all members to cover the legal expenses and wall removal costs. This required a vote that barely passed. Each household got hit with an extra fee of around $250. People were not happy about paying for the former board's mistakes. Several more members quit the HOA entirely after that, which weakened it even further. The HOA had started with about 80% of the neighborhood as members. After all this, they were down to around 50%. Without enough members, they couldn't maintain all their planned amenities and had to scale back significantly. The whole experience taught me a few things. First, my parents were right about HOAs. Second, people in positions of minor power will abuse it if they think they can get away with it. And third, sometimes the best defense is making absolutely sure you know exactly where your property lines are. My wife and I still live in the same house. The harassment stopped completely after the board turnover. We occasionally get notices about community events, which we ignore. The new board seems to have accepted that some people just don't want to be part of their organization, and that's fine. Every time I pull into my driveway, I smile a little. It's still there, exactly as it was, completely legal and untouched. And where their fancy wall used to encroach on my property, there's just an empty space that serves as a reminder of what happens when you try to take something that isn't yours. The former HOA president moved away about a year after all this went down. I heard through the neighborhood that he couldn't handle the fallout from the lawsuit disaster. Some people said he'd been forced out by angry neighbors. Others said his wife pushed for the move because she was embarrassed. Either way, he was gone. The other board members who'd been part of the lawsuit decision mostly kept their heads down. A couple moved to other neighborhoods eventually. One actually apologized to me at the grocery store, said he'd been wrong to go along with the president's vendetta. I appreciated that. These days, the HOA in my neighborhood is pretty toothless. They maintain the clubhouse and organize the occasional garage sale, but they've learned their lesson about trying to push around people who aren't members. The new leadership actually seems reasonable and focused on building community rather than enforcing arbitrary rules. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd given in to their demands. Would they have stopped there, or would they have just kept pushing for more control? I'm glad I'll never have to find out. Looking back, the whole thing was exhausting and stressful, but there's something satisfying about standing your ground when you know you're right. My wife says I'm too stubborn for my own good, and she's probably right. But in this case, that stubborn streak saved us from having our property seized by a bunch of power-hungry busybodies who thought they could steamroll anyone who got in their way. They wanted to seize my driveway based on invented violations and fake safety concerns. They held meetings and filed lawsuits and acted like they had the law on their side. But when I brought an actual county survey to their meeting and revealed the truth in front of everyone, their whole case collapsed in minutes. Their meeting ended fast, their lawsuit died, and their wall came down. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's just proving you were right all along and watching the people who tried to hurt you face the consequences of their own actions. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I am by no means an expert or pro at revenge, but I am a patient person. I disclosed this to a friend and they directed me here. Throw away for obvious reasons. It's a long read, but the setup and backstory are important. 7 years ago, I was lucky enough to be able to buy my own place. I had saved for 10 years, worked my ass off, and I was so happy to be able to have a place to call my own. Now, being a single person on the mortgage meant I had to make compromises. One such compromise was buying a property on a shared block, a lot cheaper. Where I'm from, this usually means it's on a strata title. For some, that's a bonus, as it means there's a communal fund for repairs. Typically, insurance is cheaper as it's collective, and other things like maintenance being taken care of. Strata titles also come with a lot of bylaws and restrictions on what you can and can't do. I'm a pretty private and introverted person, so having to deal with people and have limits on how I live was a no-no. I took my time, found the perfect property, shared block, but freehold title. Only thing that was I needed to pay public liability insurance for the shared walkway on the property, split equally between owners. The real estate agent is local to my area. There's also about 3 degrees of separation between us. He has friends who are friends with my friends type of thing. Didn't know him but knew of him, so that sort of felt good too. About 5 months after I move in, I get a knock on the door from the owner, landlord of the property next to me to discuss insurance. Not a problem. I ask for a copy of the policy so I have a record. It gets sent through and lo and behold, it's for strata insurance. I was incredibly confused, and after much back and forth, the property isn't a freehold title, but a strata title. I called my lawyer who conveyed the title, etc. He was dumbfounded, but over it all did the right thing and made things as right as they could. I arranged for a meeting with the real estate agent. I brought emails and printouts of the ads they had, all saying it was freehold, emails between the real estate agent and my lawyer discussing its freehold status. Despite it being an absolute black and white, he refused to accept any fault or offer anything to make things right. I don't begrudge that. He's looking out for himself. I get that. However, I wouldn't forget it. I did enter into mediation with the real estate agent, and all I asked for was, when the time came for me to sell, they'd do it or cover the costs. I thought this was reasonable, but they flat out refused, offered me $1,000 to go away, which I refused. I had the option to pursue them legally, and was advised by the mediator to do so. But ultimately I decided against it for a few reasons, the main one being my health at the time. So I planned and plotted, and I schemed and connived as to how to get back at this son of an idiot. And I settled on this. I found his personal Facebook page, which wasn't set to private, saw some photos of a boys on tour trip he went on a few weeks prior, so about 5-6 months after I bought the property. I also found his address through a business registration search. On the anniversary of the sale, for 6 years straight, I sent them flowers with a note. Dear real estate agent, remembering you on this, our special day. She has your eyes. Love, L. They varied ever so slightly over the years, but always had, on this our special day, and some weird inference to a love child and a desire to reconnect. I also from time to time arranged for postcards and letters to be sent from another country, the one he was on tour in, always signed Love L. I learned about 3 weeks ago that this guy had recently divorced, lost his home, and is not longer working as a real estate agent. His wife had found out he cheated on her. The story I was told, through said friends of friends, went along the lines of, he would get weird gifts and flowers every year, same day, every year. She, his wife, finally put 2 and 2 together and realized what the date was, and he admitted to cheating on her. Now, I didn't mean for this, but it turns out a year before I bought my house he had gone on holiday, came back with an STD, gave it to his wife but somehow convinced her that it wasn't him. As such, our special day turned out to be right around the time he'd have been balls deep, sans condom, in someone who wasn't his wife, only 1 year earlier. He's apparently lost his house, half his retirement savings, and also his business. I do feel a little bit guilty about all of it sometimes, but then I'm reminded that he's a scumbag and that karma, like me, is a patient, spiteful, and vengeful idiot. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I had a job as a call center agent. The pay was garbage and the work was horrible. Despite all that, I genuinely enjoyed what I did. The contracts changed with each campaign. Some campaigns were canceled and the call center representatives would be shuffled into the next one. If you were considered especially good, you were assigned to DirecTV. I was placed there. I could tell you many stories about DirecTV. There was the time they told us to lie to customers about movies being in high definition when solar flares disrupted the signal. Just sell them standard definition. Nobody can tell the difference. There was also the time management decided that allowing the highest selling representatives to choose the toppings for the manager's pizza party was a good idea. I chose anchovies. They forced employees to work overtime by promising prizes, then canceled the prizes afterward. The place was a meat grinder, and it was normal to arrive at work and find wiped computer screens and cleared desks where unsuccessful salespeople had once sat. I survived several of those wipes, where management reset the computers and cleared out the workspaces of anyone who had failed to sell, but this story is not really about how horrible the company was. It is about an argument I had with human resources. I was fairly good at sales, even though I hated selling. The argument involved a remote control charge I had waived for a customer and how I supposedly could have turned the situation into another sale instead. I returned to my desk with a fake write-up for some bullcrap mistake and pulled up the sales charts while fuming. I was fairly certain my time there was coming to an end. Then I discovered Dog TV. Dog TV was a glitch in the system. Its price was not high enough to count as anything more than a free 1-month trial available to almost every customer. However, the system counted it as a premium sale. That was probably because nobody in their right mind had ever sold it. Dog TV was exactly what it sounded like, television made for dogs. Yes, that is a real thing. It advertised itself as programming dogs could watch and enjoy. Adding it to an account was free for the first month, just like some of the other premium channels, except it was much cheaper afterward. For me, however, it counted as an excellent sale, right up there with selling a full-price account upgrade. Even better, adding Dog TV appeared to unlock almost every adjustment I wanted to make to the customer's account. It seemed to function like a retention offer. My sales numbers went parabolic. I had always been good, but now every manager used me as the shining example of what everyone else should be doing. All the perks reserved for the highest sellers became mine. I won gas cards. The quality department stopped saying anything when I made a mistake on a call. My customer surveys were all perfect 10s because I carefully explained the same thing to every customer. If you decide you do not want to pay for Dog TV, just call back before this date and cancel it. Then I used Dog TV to waive practically everything. Missed your payment deadline? Waived. Need a service call? Waived. Want a free equipment upgrade, free installation, premium programming, or an additional remote control? Waived. I could even offer a free month of regular service if the customer agreed to add Dog TV. And I did. That is correct. I will give you 1 free month of service in exchange for adding Dog TV. Just call before this date to cancel it, or the monthly charge will begin. Or, I am sorry that you missed your payment and received a late fee. How about I waive it if I add a television channel for dogs to your account? Or, it looks like your previous call was accidentally disconnected shortly after you told the last representative to shove the satellite up there. Well, do you know what could fix this? A free service call and a free trial of Dog TV. I remember one customer who called because their remote control had stopped working. I gave them a free replacement remote, free equipment, a free service visit, and 1 free month of service. I also made sure the equipment was marked in the system as owned rather than rented. All they had to do was accept 1 free month of Dog TV. They were ecstatic. Just promise me you will mark the survey as a 10, I said while quietly changing their service call to priority status. You bet your bottom biscuits, they replied. Fantastic. Would you also like a free movie? Another man called while extremely high and furious about his bill. The company had charged him for a high-definition receiver even though he only had standard definition equipment. The approved solution was to apologize and offer to waive the charge only if we could lock him into another sale. I had a different idea. Yeah, it sucks that we charged you the wrong fee. How about a free upgrade? Huh? How? The man was surprisingly sharp despite being high. If I add Dog TV to your account, I can waive the charges. Dogs? Like dogs chasing balls and crap? Exactly like that. He paused. How does that make any sense? So I leveled with him. It is a special offer, and it probably will not be available for long. But why dog TV? What the hell is that? Why would any company want to sell a damn show about dogs? Well, you know, man, dogs are a man's best friend. The marijuana apparently made that explanation completely reasonable. Yeah, man. That's it. Yeah, that's it. I could hear him inhaling. Alright, do you have a pen and paper? Yep. Write this in large letters. Cancel dog TV. I would have paid money to be a fly on the wall when the new equipment arrived the following week. Eventually, I became the top salesperson across the entire company. They pointed a camera at my face and asked, "Tell us, how did you become our star salesperson?" I looked directly into the phone camera. The video was going to be sent to every employee. Actually, it was worse than that. I was going to become the talking head shown to every new trainee. Unpaid, of course. What an honor. The segment was called something like Tips from the Top. Everyone was required to watch it, but nobody did. Management eventually began writing people up if they could not name one top tip for talented something. I cannot remember the final word beginning with T. I did not want to appear in the ridiculous video, but it was implied that I would be written up if I refused. Well, folks, it is easy. All you have to do is sell, 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 even if what you are selling is something like dog TV. What a great answer. What is your favorite thing to sell? What a stupid question. Why, that would be dog TV. Dog TV? I have never heard of that one. Anyone who wants to supercharge their sales should check it out. What is it about? Well, I will happily tell you for $17.99 a month. Cue fake laughter. As one of the highest sellers, I could purchase many things using sales points. Before I left, I used some of those rewards to place a remote control on the human resources representative's desk. Then I walked out of the building forever because I had another job interview. I later learned through a mutual connection that company technicians had begun deleting emails about Dog TV directly from employees' inboxes. Dog TV was definitely a sale. It was also a sale that customers called back in large numbers to cancel. Apparently, hundreds of employees caught on and started selling it at the highest possible rate. The sales leaderboard dissolved into chaos. Managers held an emergency all-hands meeting because DirecTV was furious that the call center was failing almost every other performance metric while somehow selling something to nearly every customer who called. One thing I forgot to mention is that the system eventually turned inward. The same way representatives were replaced for failing to meet their goals, the people managing the facility could also be replaced when the entire center failed. DirecTV nearly canceled the call center's contract. I have no idea what management had to do to keep it. I do know that they refused to speak with me by telephone when I later called to return my equipment. Because I am who I am, I managed to get access to the notes on my former account. They were written in all capital letters. Do not interact with this former employee. Mark equipment as returned and paid. No service call, no sale, no quality assurance. Copy all communication to quality. Order from out of pocket. No quality assurance was an unusual note. It meant the quality department was not supposed to review the call for representative mistakes. I had only seen that instruction once before, on a very important customer's account. Did they think I was going to brainwash the quality team or something? Strange. To this day, I tell people that I was once the top salesperson globally for a major company. That is not a lie. They simply erased my name from every version of the sales charts and tried to take back the award they had sent me. Anyway, thank you for watching.